So yeah, Derek, you want to let people know what you're up to, and where you've been and what you're working on?
Yeah, so I have been selling or managing sales teams for 17 years. So my career is almost old enough to vote. And most recently, about 3 years ago, I moved out to LA from New York to open the first SDR team at PatientPop. It's just as we were building an inside sales team. We previously were field sales exclusively, which is what I did at first. And we've grown to we now 5 teams with 50 SDRs. We're nearly nearly 100-person inside sales org, plus a hefty field sales. I think about 30 or 40 people there. So it's gotten really big.
Yeah, so tell me
About the transition from you from field-based to inside. What was that like?
Wasn't crazy. This was actually my first field sales job too. So, some quick background. I did door-to-door sales in college, and then after I graduated, got a job at a Fortune 50 company selling technology, and then became an SDR. We didn't call it that, but it's what we would now call an SDR at a startup called ZocDoc. It was the 35th hire, third SDR hire, and I helped build that team out. I was there for 3 years, and then I left and I went to Indeed for a year and a half, ran a full desk, and then came to PatientPop and did field sales. And I was the second sales hire, and it was like, hey, I have no idea how to do field sales, so this will be fun. So it took me a couple months to figure it out. Literally the point where my boss at the time was like, hey man, like, you can't figure it out this month. Let's think about like a different position so you can learn it. And then that was the month that I figured it out, right?
yeah.
And then did really well. Won multiple awards, like really crushed it. And then they had me move out here, run the SDR team, and I don't know. I really liked the job. Like, I didn't realize that most people don't do this, but I just kind of defaulted to like, what are processes we can build? There's no playbook. There aren't written scripting or objection answers or standards or anything. So it's like, create that and get that to the team, and so people can get better without it. Helped me scale my time, right? And including a hiring process, like what I later realized or later learned is most companies hire just by like interviewing and going with their gut. Do I like this person, right? And when I moved out here and was starting a team, I was like, well, I need other people to interview, and I actually have to understand what, if they're coming out of a room that I'm not in, I have to understand what they got. So I spent 4 hours at the pool on the rooftop of my apartment building and like looked up.
Must be nice.
Yeah, that's pretty good. LA is great. I just like had to Google's my best friend, man. Just looked up how do you create an interview process, what are the criteria we need, what should questions look like, what should the process look like. We just rolled that out, and then that improved our quality and consistency.
I think we should audible and go in that direction, which is like, if you can't figure something out, then just Google it. And like, I think one super underrated skill for people in business in general is not being able to solve problems. I think it's probably the biggest, I think it's the most valuable skill in business if you look at like hard skills instead. If you push away the EQ, like if you're actually yourself, just being able to see a situation and try and figure out a solution. A lot of people, great, they can come up with problems, but being able to actually solve it, and then if you take the mindset that you actually want to go and solve something, then 99.9% of your answers are available on the internet. So I just wanted to, so why do you think people can't do that?
So something I've actually been thinking a lot about, because as we look at our team, things change fast. We're a relatively young company and things change fast, and so we'll update our playbook. And sometimes what we find, our reps will ask the person next to them, who maybe wasn't in the most recent training for an answer, and they'll get the wrong answer. And then they'll apply that, and then that spreads across the team. And then after a couple of weeks, the managers were all like, how did people get this wrong answer when we just trained everybody on the right answer? It's just, it's easier to turn to somebody and ask them. Whether it's right or not, that's in many cases more acceptable.
Well, you can find a lot of the wrong answers on the internet too, which is like I think there's a combination of you need to be able to know where to access the information, but then the more important part is you need to know how to apply it and how it applies to you, right? Like not all advice could be correct for some situation, but not for your situation. And so being able to really think about, okay, this seems right. Is this how does this work for me? It's kind of like a weird decision tree you have to go into, but I think it all leads back to how do you get people to a level of education where they are able to move and do things without needing to think about it, right? Like almost that they have so much knowledge about what they're doing that they don't need to think about it anymore. So I don't know if I'm communicating that clearly.
And I think you said something that really gets to the root of the solution. Think.
Mm-hmm.
So
Think.
Right? Go spend, depending on the size of your problem, go spend some significant time reading online about how other people solve this problem and other people's thoughts. Lots of people will disagree with each other or think about it in different ways or just do different things. Then sit down. My recommendation, Chris, really, this might sound crazy, sit down with a notebook and take notes about your own thoughts. Right? Like if you had an expert in front of you and they were talking, you'd probably take notes so that you can remember the most important things. If you're sitting down and you're thinking through your problem and you're writing down things you're thinking about, how would this, then let's use the recruiting as an example. I came away with 15 qualities of great SDRs. No way am I going to be able to interview for 15 qualities, right? Well, what are the ones that, based on my experience, matter the most in this role? Let's narrow it down to 4 or 5. So think through.
What are they?
So coachability. We hire primarily people who've never sold anything. So they've got to be able to take feedback and apply it quickly. Work ethic, grit. And here's one that I like, that I look for. I call it willfulness, right? Are you somebody who's just going to figure out how to be successful when there's a gap? You run into a problem, you just let it be a problem, or do you figure out how to get around it and get to your goal? And there's some nice to haves: curiosity, right? Self-awareness, self-development, right? But I think those first 4 are the core things. So if I find somebody with those 4 things, I want to hire them.
Awesome, yeah, and I think there's another thing that you mentioned there that's interesting, which is like the first step in solving a problem is identifying what the real problem is. And so there's a couple things where I think people fall down. One is they end up solving the wrong problem. There's a surface level issue that they put a Band-Aid on, but it doesn't actually solve the actual problem. Or they think about the solutions before they've actually figured out what the problem is. And so that happens in product development and sales and marketing, and I mean just in life actually. And so, like for instance, you know, you're overweight, so you decide to go to the gym for 5 days. But maybe the real problem is that you don't have self-confidence. And so if you go to the gym, it's going to give you a little Band-Aid for 5 days, but you're not going to be able to sustain that lifestyle because there's an deeper underlying issue, or you know, that can be applied in a lot of places. So when I look at how to, you know, if I see a problem, I think critically about like, what is the root of this issue? Like, okay, so this isn't working. So if you ask why, whether you're asking it to someone else or yourself, like, why is that happening? how is that, blah, 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 and you eventually get to what you think might be the root of the problem, and then you start to solve it.
And do you use like the multiple whys to get to the root?
I use open-ended questions as much as possible. Open-ended, how, why, how and why are the big ones. How should we do that? Why do you think that is? I'm sure that you do the same stuff in, when you're on the phone with the prospect, right?
Yeah. Sales is really just problem solving. Good sales.
100%. 100 good. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I talk a lot about recently. I actually love your thoughts on this. I think there's basically two high level routes where you could go in sales. You're either convincing someone or you're helping someone. I've been thinking about this a lot recently. Do you think that holds true? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah. I think most people fall into the first group where they're trying to convince people. It's the
That's what I did at the beginning. Even when I was in marketing, I was going and trying whatever I was trying to do, whether it was trying to get market research, or get product feedback, or get our product into the first 10 accounts so that we could collect the feedback and do a beta. It was always, for me, it was convincing when I was young. I just didn't understand it. So yeah, I do think that a lot of people fall into that camp.
Yeah, it's the hardest too. You feel like you're pushing hard every day. One of the things that I tell new reps when they join my team is no one cares about you. Like, it sounds brutal, but it's like your prospects don't care about you. They don't. Like, you're cold calling them, or even if you're calling an inbound, they still don't care about you. So if you're telling them what you want to happen, it's not going to be helpful. Tell them why the thing that you're asking them to do benefits them. And you're much more likely to get something. Or better yet, ask questions and have them tell you what they would like to fix. Even if you already know, it's 1,000 times more powerful to have them tell you.
So how do people move? I'm trying to reflect back on how when I made that transition, and from convincing to helping, and as I think about it in real time, I feel like the transition happened when I actually had the capability of helping someone. So until you have that level of either confidence or conviction or just true skill, you default into convincing until you are under. So if we take that methodology and we apply it to a sales model, people need to be super educated on the problems that the customers are having, and it would be ideal if they had real experience solving them. Then you have the confidence and the experience to talk through someone, and as I go through now, if I have a discovery call with someone else, basically anything that they could tell me, because I've worked with enough different companies, I've seen that problem before. I know what it feels like. I know that you have politics with these 3 other groups. I know you tell me this. I know that this metric is at this level because I've seen it a bunch before. And we did X, Y, and Z, and then this metric moved here. These people were happy. And you just walk them through a path where I know where you are, and this is how we did to get out of it. Then I think you get to a point where you're really helping someone, not having to I don't have to convince anyone. It feels good. If you don't want to work with me or buy my stuff, more power to you. I feel good about the product that we offer, and I feel good about the way that I present it, and I don't need to convince or be pushy. I don't know.
You know the problem and you know the solution. You know what the problems are. Getting it.
And there are a lot of solutions out there, right? And so my solution isn't for everyone. Just like in every product. A lot of people have the problem that I solve, but my solution might not be for them. They might want results too fast. They might not want to be paying this much. They might not have the money to pay that much. And the same thing goes for a product or a service or anything. So I think, go ahead, sorry.
You're fortunate in that you have that experience where you solved a problem a lot. You've been in those shoes. My recommendation, just for people who can't be in that situation, like when we hire salespeople, we can't hire somebody who used to be a physician, but right.
It's true. That'd be tough.
Right. But something they can do is like read every case study, watch every video that you have of your customers. If possible,
Mm-hmm.
if you're a new sales leader, go talk to 15 customers and ask them questions about why they bought, what problems they had, or how your solution helped. Take good notes, record it if you can. Get that in front of your team. Anything that helps with that conviction to switch the mindset from I got to convince people to buy this thing to anyone who buys this is really lucky because this is such a good solution.
So do you think globally, like not like across the world, but just across the board, that salespeople consume all the content that's out there from the company? Case studies, videos. Do you think people are doing that? I don't think so either. In my experience, they're not. I've had this weird. Actually, I've done it at a company. I thought it was well done, but I'd like some feedback on the idea, which is that if you have a really strong content marketing team, and not the content that you're developing a PDF so you can get a bunch of MQLs, not that type of content like I'm going out and I'm talking to a physician every week and we're having a conversation like this and we're talking for an hour about the problems they're having, the solution, maybe their product, maybe a bunch of other stuff that they're dealing with. We have an hour video, whether it's a video or a podcast or whatever, the sales team then consumes that on an ongoing basis. So right, you're putting out these videos, it becomes an ongoing training and development loop. So you have marketing content, which is doing great things for top of the funnel brand leads, but it also serves as this ongoing sales training and sales development engine. I've been thinking a lot about it. What do you think?
Yeah, that's really interesting. That sort of dovetails nicely with, you had a post a few weeks ago about how to use trade shows or conferences correctly, right? As a way to get into the customer story. I thought that was brilliant. And yeah, this is really good. I'm gonna see if I can implement this. It'd be nice to have rotate through the different sales leaders, but just interview current customers. Yeah,
Yep.
I think it would really help with conviction with our reps. It would really help us better language.
It makes you, it allows at a great scale for your entire team to have a better sense for what the person on the other end of the phone or email or LinkedIn is actually like. You get the things that you don't get, like what their personality's like, the language they use. You're going to see the same things come up in conversation over and over, and then you're going to be able to apply those different things over time. I think a lot of people, when I pitch doing long form video to a lot of people, and including some of the clients that we work with, and people always think it always ends up being the last thing on their priority list. Like, why would we go? Like, I don't see any value in making an hour-long video about something that has nothing to do with our product when we're just interviewing someone in the market. And I think about it the exact opposite. Like, I think it's the most valuable thing you could do. It's in complete top of the funnel. Content works way better when it is farther away from your product. It serves as a sales training piece of engine. You can chop that video up and use it for a bunch of different types of LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram content. You build a relationship with the person that you're interviewing. You can potentially get referrals or do networking after you have that conversation. I just think I don't understand why people see it as an expensive, low value activity. I see it the opposite.
Well, I think it's a common fallacy, some other things that I see. When we think about the sales funnel, everyone wants to focus on the bottom of the funnel, right? Closing being the most important thing. And, for a while we were fighting this mindset around, even with SDRs who just wanted seats, but like, you can't consistently get things to fall at the bottom of the funnel unless you're putting enough stuff in the top.
Enough of the right stuff, or enough of the good stuff, right? Because a lot of people jam a bunch of garbage at the top, and that doesn't work out either.
that's a problem too. But for most salespeople, performing more demos or just slightly increasing the quality of their prospects solves their quota problem more so than becoming a closer. Like if you're closing 50%, it's hard to go to 30, but it's probably easier to double the number of demos that you do. And I think it's just the same fallacy all across. So people who are looking at video probably, I'm just guessing, but probably see it as so far away from the bottom of the funnel when they want to focus on closes, right? How many deals, opportunities are in the pipeline that are scheduled to close this month? The focus is.
So how do you, what are the key metrics that the SDRs get scored on at your company? And then the AEs are probably pretty obvious. So like how do those two teams work together? And what are the SDRs scored on?
Great. Most important thing that I care about is demos performed with decision makers. And we have I don't want to say like low bar. We have a pretty simple matrix for what you have to hit. If they're the decision maker or certain kinds of influencers we'll take, and they're in front of a computer or can meet in person, if you want to bring in more patients, that's qualified for us right there. I mean, right, at a medical practice, right, and they have a location.
Because you guys, because you have a well-defined ICP, right? A lot of other SaaS companies don't, which is why they get a bunch of garbage because they can't make choices about who they actually serve.
Right. Solve that problem first.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah. But you guys are good, right? Because like whether they use your product or not is pretty cut and dry.
Yes. There's some things when they get more ideal, like can we integrate with their scheduling system? Right. That's better. But most of our customers who don't integrate, and our product works great. You know, because front end stuff is like SEO, website, reputation. So, and then we also have a really big market. So we're pretty, like we're lucky there. And then other things that I care about for our SDRs, if they are on inbounds, I care about their conversion rate on the different levels of inbound. So most of our under this umbrella, our inbound leads are content downloads. So people download, for the most part, their white papers. And then we've got demo requests, and we've got a tool where practice can diagnose their web presence. And so we track rates there. And then it's just show rate. But it all builds up to how many performed demos can we get.
Do you have any comp that attaches, that incentivizes SDRs for revenue? Have you made that jump yet?
For seats. So like users, for maybe somebody out there that means, right? So a 2-doctor practice would buy 2 seats. And so we actually just moved to a comp plan that more heavily incentivizes the performs. It used to be very heavy on seats, which sort of explains why there is this over focus on those things. At this point, our closers are good. They can get enough pipeline. We can generate enough demos that get performed. Then it'll be fine. We'll be really strong. So we actually increase what we'll pay on a performed demo, and we decrease what we'll pay on a seat. Largely because that's what the SDR is the most control over. And they'll get money for each seat that buys.
Cool.
Yeah.
So when there's been some posts going on LinkedIn over the past couple of weeks about, I mean, including myself, questioning whether if we started your company today, whether the predictable revenue model is the right way to go. Now, I mean, what are your thoughts on that in general? And then let's kind of like dive in. Obviously, it's company specific, There's a lot of different things. It's also dependent on the leaders and how they want to run the company. I think there's a lot of ways to be successful. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this question. Just kind of wanted to see what your thoughts were. So I think it was just to clarify the question, right? Like, Salesforce got here with that model, and then now they're continuously running it. You guys got to where you are today with that type of model, and now you're continuing it. But if you started your company today, would you do this? Would you take if Salesforce started today, would they take the same path? Would that be the smartest route?
I think I'm going to surprise a lot of people with my answer. So, when PatientPop first started, it was entirely field sales, and we ran the full sales cycle. If I were to start a company today, whether it's inside salespeople or field, I would not have SDRs right out of the gates. Like, assuming that we already have product market fit, I would want full cycle salespeople. And I think SDR solves a specific problem, which is, right, you can't get enough pipeline for your closers. If you need to specialize, that's one thing. The second problem that it really solves is, I guess, going up the recruiting funnel to get good talent. So I'm going to wait until we get a team of 6 to 10 full cycle salespeople who are excellent closers, right? Before considering rolling out any kind of SDR team, which might never make sense.
Yep. And so go a little deeper into why you would make that decision. So is it because you think it's more efficient, because you think that it's a better customer experience, because you think that it's just the SDRs aren't necessary at that size? Like why was full cycle the right way to go at the beginning for this fictitious company that we're talking about?
So definitely all those things, right? Sure, it's typically a better customer experience. So that has to be outweighed by, significantly to change. I think somebody goes through a full sales cycle, they are much more motivated to make sure they're going after the right thing. It's also harder to manage to have two types of teams. If you have 3 closers and 3 SDRs, and managing that well is hard, especially given that a lot of sales leaders aren't, like, when you manage SDRs, you have to be very metrics driven. And I think what sometimes tends to happen with closers is you sort of lose the sight of the top of the funnel for the bottom, right? You've got to focus on all that. It's easier to manage when you're looking at the same thing for everybody. And then if you get to a point where you know that your closers are very good, and if you loaded them up with twice the pipeline, that you could double your revenue, then it's worth bringing in SDRs because that actually lowers your CAC. But you have to prove that. And when you're young, go ahead.
Oh no, you please finish.
So like when you're a young company and you're trying to onboard these AEs with a still unproven sales process, right? Unproven that you can start to scale it, it can get really expensive to load up all these heads and hope that they work together. Like, figure out one piece at a time. It's both easier to manage, slows your burn, right? Gives you more control over your outputs.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard from a lot as I've started to push this harder, both on LinkedIn and over the past 5 years that I've been in this world. I've heard a lot of AEs say, even if they do have SDR support, the deals that they source are better quality, better fits. And my hypothesis on that is, because I'll just give you an example, right? So I worked for a company here, from opportunity to close, here are the percentages based on the source. Outbound, 4%. If we create an opportunity, we run those at 4%. AE sourced, 17%. AE is going to be a blend of referrals, their own outbound, inbounds that don't get tracked appropriately, right? There's an email that goes directly to them. That's the blend at 17. And then inbounds are at like 35 to 40. So that's the spectrum. And so my hypothesis on why the outbounds win at that rate, the AEs win higher, is because it's really challenging to just call someone up and artificially create a sale for them, right? Like you're basically, I think a lot of people need to figure out the problem for themselves, and yeah, we can help them with questions and things like that. But I think the idea that you just do first touch, demo, close for a non-transactional product, and that becomes a predictable revenue stream, I think that we're going to continue to see that model decline. I think that the value of what an AE could do is build relationships and add value for 3 months on LinkedIn, and when that person decides that they need something, then they reach out or come inbound or do something like that. I think there's a much longer term, I think that's where the AEs could start to do their own prospecting, however they do it on their own, but also sharing content, active on LinkedIn, building their network if they plan on being in the territory for a long time. So let's not get stuck, or let's not go down the rabbit hole of turnover because of the average tenure of a sales rep. They're usually not in it for the long term, right? Like if you go in and you say I'm going to be here for 2 years, that account I know is on a long-term contract until after I'm probably going to be gone. Why am I going to work that account? And then the next rep comes in and that account hasn't been touched in 2 years. And so there's a tenure thing that also I've been thinking about. I just bounced all over the place.
Yeah.
Those brands.
Oh man, we could go hours just on. I don't understand why people spend 1 to 2 years at a company, unless the company's bad, and you haven't been able to suss that out in the interview process.
Yep.
That
Yep. And that happens.
Yeah.
Justin talks about that a lot, right? Or maybe it's Colin, or both of them. It's like, if you have been in a company for 9 months, you're like barely at the point where you can make a meaningful impact. Barely. And so like being there for I think 2 years is the absolute minimum, but when you move, you got to start over. And then even if you move up in title, you're moving back in the ability to make an impact. And the way that you continue to grow your career and increase your earnings and do all those things is by having the experience and making the actual impact, not just carrying the title and like making small little salary jumps. Eventually that you run out there because people are smart and they realize that you've just been jumping around until one point they realize, hey, you're a VP, but you've actually done nothing meaningful at the past 4 companies you've worked at. And then you're stuck. And then you're living a $300,000 lifestyle, making $250, and realize that you're never going to be able to keep growing it, and you're going to have to take a step backwards, and then you're fucked.
Those are largely the external consequences, right? Or I guess people can look at you and say, well, you haven't been here long enough. How do you learn? How do you grow your skills when you're not at a company? You're there for 9 months. That's how long it takes to learn the company. That's how long it takes to learn the team and the product sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you leave after a year, how did you significantly grow any of your skills? How did you prove to yourself you can do things that you didn't know how to do coming in?
How did you solve a meaningful problem for the company that you can go and speak to, right? Like I have built the company that I'm continuing to build right now because at 2 companies in a row, I went in there and I had a process. I knew what problem they had going into it, and I fixed it. And I got better at it every time. The first time I did it, it took longer because I made more mistakes. The second time, I still made mistakes, but I made less of them. I knew better what the path was, and I'm continuing to run that model at companies over and over and getting better at it. And so, like, people need to think about what story am I going to tell when I leave this company and go and try and get my other job? What story is that going to be, and how does that put me in a position to get a job that's a lot better than the one I have today?
Well, here's what's interesting about this. I think Amy talks about this a lot, because companies haven't been thoughtful about who they want to hire and what they need. It's actually a gap in the hiring process. Somebody comes in and you don't ask them for that story because you don't know what story you need. Then you hire somebody. Oh, weird. Sales VP tenure is doing this, and now is at whatever it is now, 17 months 17 months. It's a problem on both sides. It's sort of the candidate problem feeds off of their recruiting problem that allows them to do this kind of thing.
Yeah, the VP, whether it's marketing or sales, I'm guessing that sales is shorter because they take the brunt of it. But that problem is really, I believe, driven by the fact that companies are raising too much money, have unrealistic goals, and a bad plan. And so, and then because they have unrealistic goals, they drive their leaders to do the wrong things to hit those short-term goals. And when you do the wrong things, it's counterintuitive, right? It's like, we need to sell this month. And so you put all of your energy into doing these short-term things that, one, don't work well in the short term and definitely don't set you up long term. And so, but it all leads back to this. I think there's two. I'm guessing that 17-month tenure, first, by the way, is probably mostly in companies that are somewhere between seed and Series D. That's probably where the big tenure issues are, because they've taken on way too much money. They've oversold the company to investors. They've taken on a lot of money in order to continue to please their investors and continue to raise their valuation. They need to get to certain revenue numbers that they projected that are nowhere near reasonable. And then, so then you have a VP that needs to go out and hire a ton of people to get there. And goes back to your thing. Okay, now we have 9 SDRs and 9 AEs, or whatever the split is, with no sustainable or no repeatable proven sales process. And then it just becomes as the goals get bigger, it just becomes more and more of a mess.
You can't have quality training without a quality process, right? You can't have good. Yeah, it just becomes everything hawk, and you can't predict it.
But I think I really do believe in most companies, the root of the issue is not the talent of the VP of sales. It is the mistake that the companies make on fundraising early, because they think that getting Series A is the same as becoming profitable, and it's not exactly how it works. Like, we celebrate. I see companies that do press releases and are super happy to raise $39 million for their Series C or B or C or D or whatever it is. And, if you have access to their financials, you look in the thing, okay, they just did a $50 million round, but last quarter they lost $16 million. Okay, so they just raised $50 million. They're burning 16 a quarter. Their burn's probably going to go up. So these people have 10 months of runway. They just raised $50 million and they're burning through cash. They're going to have to raise money again in 9 months.
Great for investors, because then they get to come in and buy a big company, assuming the company does well.
Assuming the company grows, but I don't know when it's probably already starting happening. It just gets hidden, but it will happen more with the companies that raise $400 million and have to fire sale for 200 because they're not going to be successful. That's going to happen a lot. That's going to happen a lot more because companies have to raise too much money and don't have the right economics or path to profitability.
I'm glad you said that. I think path to profitability is going to be a word we hear a lot more in 2020.
I hope so. Yeah, let's talk. I like it. I'm going to start talking about that.
Especially after Uber, which I don't even think is the worst one, but the WeWork fiasco, and
Mhm.
money is, everyone's a VC now, and so
Mhm.
money is pretty cheap. And in
Mhm.
'01 or whatever, when the .com, when was the .com bust? Was it '01, something like that? Like,
Something like that.
you know, from what I've read, it seems like the bust happened before people could realize. The bust triggered the realization that a lot of these companies were completely unrealistic,
Overvalued.
overvalued.
Yep.
And
Yep.
we
Mhm.
we haven't had a bust yet, but we've had a growth cycle longer than that. So maybe
It's
do
been very long.
very long, which I appreciate, but knock on wood.
Me too. Yeah, seriously.
Okay, so we're gonna jump into the lightning round. So basically, what's gonna happen is I'm gonna like fire off a question, and then if one word answer, one sentence answer, if it needs more context, you do whatever you want. All right. So biggest challenge for an SDR today?
Oof. Biggest challenge for an SDR today. Finding a good company. You want
Ooh,
and,
I like it.
and here would be my recommendation to any future or current SDRs. Find a company with strong product market fit, with managers focused on coaching, and with a good training program.
Mhm.
Don't worry about how much
What is?
you'll get that. Yeah.
What about the thing that most sales dev teams are doing today that they shouldn't be anymore?
Probably focusing on wins instead of pipeline.
Mhm. So they should be focusing on wins.
Should be focusing on pipeline.
Got it.
Don't worry about whether they're going to close. Figure out your minimum expectations for what for what your opportunity has to have, and
Mhm.
then get it to somebody and make sure it performs. Most people that are SDRs have not been in sales that long, so it's easy to think, I'm going to judge the quality of this based on how I feel about it. Objective criteria, and then you get it to a salesperson, and then you get feedback on it.
Mhm.
What is the biggest opportunity in biz dev that people for 2020 that people aren't doing today?
Reps or leaders?
Either. You answer. You decide.
Reps. Here's the big secret, man. I think it's called LinkedIn Voice. If you have the app, you can do a voice drop into somebody's inbox.
Mhm.
I don't know anyone who's doing that for us.
Yep.
Mhm.
What about for managers?
Maybe like group coaching. I haven't heard about this,
Okay.
but group coaching / like peer coaching. So
Mhm.
pull reps into a room, listen to the call together, and have the reps coach each other with a leader in the room, so if something crazy gets said, but drive that. What are people doing well? What's something you might do differently if you did this? And everybody learns off of each other. I think they absorb it better.
Cool. And the last thing is, do you have a question that you want to have figured out? And then the idea would be that maybe the people that after they watch this video will answer your question so you can get some insights.
I would like to hear different people's thoughts on I'm trying to narrow it down to one thing, like prioritization. When you're in a small company and you have 10 things that all take similar amounts of effort and appear to probably deliver same results, but you can't do them all. How do people solve that problem?
That's what we have. How do people solve that problem?